What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Facade. I'm your host, Gavin J. Gallagher, and on this podcast, I explore the mental and emotional game often playing out subconsciously, both in your mind and the mind of everyone else in the real estate or property investment market. The key to success in this game is to master your mindset and behavior, to take control of your thoughts, your emotions, and most importantly, your ego. Welcome to the show. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode, and welcome to the first episode of 2025, which means that we're in episode number 233 to the best of my knowledge. And I hope you've all had a great break over the holidays. I hope you got some good rest and relaxation and recovery. And I hope you've set some interesting plans and goals and resolutions for 2025. I've certainly spent a couple of days giving this some thought, and in the process of all that came up with some ambitious goals for 2025. And this is something that I discussed yesterday with some of my accelerator clients. We have a weekly accountability call where we talk about our plans and we talk about what we're going to do this year and what we're doing on a weekly basis in order to realize and make those goals and those plans a reality. Now, on that topic, I just want to quickly mention that on the 1st of February, which is Saturday, first Saturday of February, there is going to be my annual event, and I'll be welcoming in the newest members in the accelerator, those people that are joining in the January intake. Those of you who are interested in making 2025 the year that you took control and started to change your financial future, then be sure to reach out to me. I'll put a link down in the show notes so you're able to do that. But it would be great to have you join the intake and meet me and the other members on the 1st of February when we all get together at, it'll be a hotel near the airport, and we usually have lunch together, and we'll also sit down with a bunch of, I'll get a guest speaker, and then we'll all just sit down and we'll have a conversation about the market and what's happening and stuff like that. So look, guys, I hope some of you hope this resonates and sounds good to some of you, and if it does, look forward to meeting you on the day. Now, what is going on in the world? It is just crazy what's happening in California at the moment. Those of you who are following the news, it's pretty impossible to miss it. But we have had just the scale of destruction in California is just beyond belief. I've been looking at some videos and stuff, and people are driving through these, like what looks to be just this enormous inferno. And they're trying to get to safety, and you're having to drive through miles of it, and like flames crossing your car, and you can probably feel the heat through the window and stuff. Pretty scary, shocking stuff. And what has caused these fires? Well, I just looking at the paper this morning, 10,000 homes have been destroyed. And so far, they're planning, or they're certainly expecting a lot more fatalities, but so far 11 people have been found dead in their homes. What caused the fires is it's a combination of things. It's like the perfect storm in a sense, in more ways than one. So first of all, severe drought conditions. Southern California has experienced the driest start to the rainy season on record. And what this meant was that all of the vegetation was completely dry. And that just obviously fuels any kind of a fire once it kicks off. Now, in addition to that, there's what's known as the Santa Ana winds. And these are hurricane force winds that come through, and it's about 100 miles per hour, some of these gusts. And what this has done is flamed the fire. Like there was, I think they've already identified a couple of people that started the fires intentionally, arson. And you might kind of think, why would anyone do that? Usually there's just, it's like a headbanger, somebody that just has some sort of a fire obsession and can't help themselves, and they start fire like because it's kind of exciting for them, and then they watch And all you need is something like that to happen. And then these crazy sort of strong winds, and it'll just blow the entire thing. And so apparently in the space of a couple of hours, it spread to something like 9,000 acres. And I understand that the area that is now burnt to ashes is about the equivalent of twice the size of Manhattan Island, where New York is. So that'll just give you some idea of just how dramatic this is. Another thing that has caused it is obviously climate change. The region has faced increased temperatures over the years, and there's been volatile rainfall levels. And you go through periods where there is too much rain, and then you go through periods where there's absolutely no rain. And this has it's just meant that there's almost no rainfall when you need it, and there's reservoirs that are half empty and stuff. And so what that has led to is suddenly the firefighting efforts. I heard today that there's firefighters going up to these fire hydrants and there's no water in them. So you're trying to put out fires and there's absolutely no water coming out of the fire hydrant. And it's because the reservoirs are empty. I also heard that they're actually removing the reservoirs in some locations because they don't think it's very environmentally friendly. And you start questioning who's in charge making these decisions. It's kind of ridiculous. And so anyway, like that's the cause. But what I wanted to talk about is just the challenges that is going to be present in rebuilding California. If you think about now, 10,000 homes in the space of a couple of days have been gone. So, I mean, if you go on social media, it's harrowing seeing people that have just lost everything. Their homes are gone. And one of the big issues that you have is that you're going to have 10,000 people trying to get into a hotel, to alternative accommodation. 10,000 homes. Actually, 10,000 homes is more than 10,000 people. Let's assume that a couple lives in a home and perhaps a couple of kids. So maybe that's 30 or 40,000 people that have been impacted. But 10,000 homes have been gone. You've got now 10,000 homes that need to be rebuilt. And one of the big issues that you can imagine is in America, particularly in California, which is what they call a blue state, there's an awful lot of regulation and permits required. And so you might sort of say to a builder or a contractor, listen, I need you to come in here and start rebuilding my house immediately. And they'll be like, well, can't actually do that because we need permits before we can actually start the job. And so, okay, go off and try and get your permit, please. But the guy is going off applying for a permit when 10,000 people are trying to do the very same thing. You can imagine the bottlenecks that this is going to create. And I heard that it was already pretty bad in California. You had a situation where I heard somewhere that somebody wanted to put a fence up in their backyard and it took them 2 years to get the permit for that. So you can imagine what it's going to be like with 10,000 people clambering to get building permits to rebuild their homes. Because what are you going to do? Try and live in a hotel for the next 2 or 3 years? It's really, just think about what is going to go on in the next couple of years. In addition to that, think about labor and materials. You've got 10,000 people all wanting to rebuild their home at the very same time. How many contractors do you think are required to build 10,000 homes simultaneously? It's just not possible. In an area where there's 10,000 homes, maybe 30 or 40 were being rebuilt at any one time. So maybe there's capacity for 100 homes to be built at one time. And suddenly you've got 100 times that requirement of capacity. That's going to slow down stuff. It's also going to push up prices because the guys that are able to work will have so much demand for their services that they'll probably be able to double their prices and they'll still get paid. Because you've got people, one of the things about that part of California is there's a lot of very wealthy people and very big houses. I saw some of the houses that are burning to the ground are $30 million houses. Now that guy that can afford a $30 million house, he can probably afford 30 million rebuild, and ring up the builder and say, I don't care about those other 5 people that you're quoting for. I want you to come in and just build me my $30 million dream home again. And I want it to be done tomorrow. So tell all those other guys to go to hell. I'll pay you double. Now, in addition to that, we have a really strange thing about insurance in California. I heard now that 69% of the insurance coverage in that entire area, Pacific Palisades, I think it's called, that entire area, 69% of them last year, in June of last year, they were informed that they would no longer be covered for fire risk. And that is because there was so many fires in the last couple of years that this has been considered a major risk, and the insurance companies didn't think that they could cover it. So they cancelled the coverage for 69% of their clients last year. So now 10,000 homes have caught fire because of this terrible fire that's taken place. And do the maths, that's about 6,900 people that don't have insurance by the sounds of it. So how are they going to rebuild? They are not going to be able to rebuild with the money from the insurance. They're going to have to go and, well, they'll have to figure that one out. How do you do that? Do you get money from the bank? Does the bank give you money when you're not insured and when you're being told that you won't be insured? That's another major issue. And then if you were to say you can't, the bank were to say, we're not going to lend you any money until your house is insured or your property is insured. And you say, you go to an insurance company and say, I need to be insured. And they say, well, we're not covering that area any longer. And then they say, but, maybe they just say, okay, instead of it costing $2,000 or $3,000 a year, it's going to cost you $10,000 for us to insure your home. So who's going to be able to afford that? So you can see this knock-on impact of this. You've got the permits and the regulations, the planning permissions. You've got the labor and the materials. How many materials are going to be required in order to fix up that many homes at the same time? How many contractors are going to be required? Is the capacity there? Is the insurance money there in the first place? Are the banks going to lend and assist in this? So it's pretty obvious that there's going to be some major political fallout from this. And there's speculation certainly I've been looking at different news sites and stuff, and whereas California has been, for decades, has been a blue state, very much a Democrat state. You kind of wonder whether these bottlenecks and all of these problems now, that's going to force 10,000 people to call into question the leadership that is running the city and sort of say, like, do we really need all this regulation? Do we need all these permits? How do we have a situation where the fire hydrants ran dry? Is there not somebody in charge that's actually working for all of this stuff to be resolved? And if you go and look, Joe Rogan came out about 6 months ago or a year ago. He did an episode where he actually talked about this area of California, and he said that the area of Pacific Palisades, in the right wind conditions, it would burn all the way from the mountain down to the sea. And that was actually known about 6 months ago. And here we are in a situation where it has now taken place. And literally, have a look at some of the photographs on social media, and you will see that it is literally every single house from the mountains down to the sea burnt to a cinder. It's absolutely incredible. The reason I wanted to bring this up, apart from the fact that my heart goes out to anyone who's lost their home, and there's going to be massive disruption, apart from the loss of life, which is obviously terrible. But the other side to this is there's an aspect of comparison that comes into my mind between Ireland and California, and that is because in Ireland we have got a housing crisis that is going on for the last decade or so, and we have somewhat similar bottlenecks taking place. But instead of this all happening overnight, you have 10,000 homes burning down in the space of one night. That's pretty bad, and that's really dramatic and very obvious and very visible. But here in Ireland, we have got 30,000 houses being built every year, and we have a need for something like 80,000 a year to be built. So that's 50,000 shortfall every year. And so to see 10,000 homes burnt to the ground visually in the space of a couple of days, think about that visual and then multiply that by 5, and that gives you an idea of the annual shortfall in the Irish housing situation. And that is the reason why during the week we found the newspapers came out and said that the average Dublin house price is now €630,000, and the average mortgage is now 308,000, I think it is, or something like that. So it's really gone up, and very, very similar root cause to all of this. If you look at the permits are an issue. You've got, here in Ireland, you've got so much delay in trying to get planning permission for your home. People that are trying to build housing estates, delays. People that are trying to build apartment blocks, delays. I noticed actually that the company that owns Dundrum Shopping Centre in South Dublin here, the old Dundrum Shopping Centre, this is an area that I know quite well because I grew up in that area, that they applied for 960 apartments and they've been turned down. So that's 960 more homes that would have come to the system that have been now turned down. And you kind of question when you see this. We were supposed to hit 35,000 homes built in 2024. The numbers have come in and it looks like it's closer to 32,500. So that's another 2,500 people not in a home. Now, whether that will catch up this year, I've heard that there's a big number supposed to be delivered in 2025. But it just shows you the difference and the comparison between the US and the Irish system. And very, very similar. We need to streamline our processes around permits, planning permission, all of that kind of stuff. We need to get the government needs to kind of get involved in streamlining. They were supposed to redraft the Planning Act last year. And it was an exercise that was to try to simplify and streamline the planning laws. And they took the Planning Act, which is where all the laws are derived from, and over the years, that document has just kind of grown, and they've added to it, and they've amended it, and they've done this and that. The Planning Act currently runs to something like 800 pages. And rather than tear up the document and start again and say, guys, let's come up with a straightforward Planning Act that is much, much more streamlined and we can get things done quicker. Rather than do that, they tinkered with the 800-page document. And so you end up with all of these exemptions and all of these kind of things. And you need nearly a science degree in order to kind of get planning these days, because you got to involve planning consultants and architects and all of this. And even when you've hired a really top-notch team, you still don't know, are you going to get planning or not? You have bought land, the land has got permission or has got zoning for residential. So you should be able to put in an application and reliably get yourself an application grant that says you can build so many apartments or houses or whatever it is. And unfortunately, that is not the case. You go through the system and you might be turned down. If you're not turned down, what you would then have to wait for is for the appellate system to come in. And that is where An Bord Pleanála are involved. And An Bord Pleanála have a second look at the application if anybody was unhappy with or placed an appeal on it. And that used to be the case, that it was just those two things took place. You got your planning or you didn't, and if you didn't, you could appeal it. But if you got your planning and somebody else didn't like it, they could appeal it. And that would be it, and you go through the process, and that usually added 6 to 9 months. Now, in addition to that, you have the judicial system getting involved, and that is where if you don't like the result, after An Bord Pleanála have made their final decision, then you can go and get a judicial review and bring it in front of the courts. So it's a third chance for you to be knocked on the head. So what does this do? It just drags out the whole process even longer. And so this is, first of all, a major, major issue that we need to tackle. We need to streamline that so that when you're buying land, you know with a reasonable degree of certainty that you can build so much on it and that you can get started fairly quickly. You don't want to be in a situation where it's going to take you 2 to 3 years to go and get yourself on site. Capacity in the construction sector, exactly the same as California, are now going to experience 10,000 people picking up the phone next week and saying, can I get a quote for a building job? You can imagine what it's going to be like. It's going to be, in many respects, it's going to be a bonanza for builders in California, because they're going to have probably 10 or 20 clients for potential clients for every one job that they have the capacity for. So they'll be able to charge twice what they would have. So it'll drive up prices. A lot of people will say that's price gouging, and maybe that's true to a degree. But what are you going to do when you've got far more work than you ever have capacity for? That's just the way the market works. You push up prices. The cost of materials. If you are trying to build 10,000 houses at the same time, then what does that do? Well, that pushes up the cost of timber, steel, concrete, curtains, doors, windows, electrics, plumbing, everything, all of the materials that go into the home. There's so much demand for those products all at the same time. What's that going to do? It's going to push up prices. Now, here in this country, we have the very same problem. We have a demand for 50,000 houses every year, and we're building 30,000. So there's a shortage there of 20,000 in terms of our capacity. That means that we've got more work than we actually have the capacity to do. And so there's another comparison there. In terms of solutions, it's a difficult one. I mean, you start to look at the traditional construction sector and you say, you know what, if we streamlined the planning system and the permits and all that, then we'd be getting into the next bit, which is how do you get on-site and off-site as fast as possible? What would make that fast and what would make it even quicker? And the obvious thing is things like modular housing, prefabrication, building your home in a factory, in a mass production kind of a capacity, and then it gets shipped out on trucks and then it gets erected in the space of a couple of days. That is most definitely a possible way to go. Now, I know that is a system that is in operation in Europe in various places, and they have got factories that are kind of kitted out for that. Here in Ireland, it's not quite, we don't have, first of all, the size of the country. So that we don't have factories that are building at that kind of capacity. You'd need to be bringing it in from Europe. And if you're doing that, then you get into the bottlenecks in terms of logistics. How do you get large trucks with trailers full of housing components like walls and roofs and stuff? How do you get them from Europe into Ireland? So you're either erecting factories in Ireland to do this, or you're erecting it in Germany, we'll say, or France, and shipping it across on a car ferry. That's not easy. Also, how do you get to Ireland? You have to go on the Irish ferries, whereas you could go through the UK. But now Brexit has introduced all of these tariffs and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different issues that we have here. And I think we really have to think about just where this is all going. Are we looking at a situation when we have a new government here in Ireland, and it looks like it's going to be the same guys again, pretty much Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael? That personally, that works for me. I was a little bit nervous about the other parties getting in. I think the shift to the left was actually going to be problematic. I don't think anyone denies that there's a need for construction of homes and stuff like that, and in much, much greater numbers. How that's achieved is a different story. I don't think telling people that houses all have to be dropped in price, as was one of the suggestions that I saw the political party Sinn Féin were coming up with, that all houses were going to be, reduced in price. How do you achieve that? If you've got 50,000 people trying to buy a home and you've got 30,000 homes being built, and you've got a political party that's in charge saying all these homes that you were going to sell for 600,000, you need to drop the price and make it 310,000, we'll say. So half the price. Does that now mean that all the problems are solved? There's still 50,000 people who want to buy those houses. So those 50,000 people who can afford, everyone can afford it now because the price has dropped in half. And so suddenly you're in a situation where the demand remains the same, the capacity remains the same, but the prices have just been reduced. So people have more money. And what does that mean? They can bid more. So a little bit like what we see in California, the guys that have the money for a $30 million mansion, they will be offering more money to contractors to go and build the properties because they can afford it. And then the people that are further down the ladder, they'll be the ones that can't afford to bid extra money to get the job started. So I can see this having a major impact. You're going to have people that cannot get homes built, that have just being burnt down, not being able to get them built for 2 to 3 years. So 2 to 3 years, let's say even longer, let's say 4 years. 4 years from now, what happens? Donald Trump is about to take office in the next week or so. 4 years from now, there's another election. And what usually happens when somebody like Donald Trump gets into power, the Republicans have won. There's going to be possibly a backlash against that in the next 4 years. They'll all want to put a Democrat into power. But in California, you're going to have people still living out of suitcases in hotels and stuff because they can't get their houses rebuilt. And if that's the case, then is that going to actually shift the state towards a red state, deregulation? Every time I bring a guest on from the US, they talk about red states versus blue states. If you're a landlord, you want to be a landlord in a red state, not in a blue state. In a blue state, a lot of regulation, a lot of laws that protect tenants. In a red state, you got a lot less regulation and a lot of laws that would protect a landlord. And so it's going to be interesting in the next couple of years to watch this and see how it's repaired and see what kind of political fallout comes from it. Because for sure there's going to be major frustration, and the same frustration that we're feeling here in Ireland because of the housing crisis and the fact that we just can't seem to fix it years and years on. As we've been sitting by and watching it. So guys, hope you found this one interesting. Short enough one for the start of the year. Once again, my accelerator is open. Intake is there. Those of you looking to scale a portfolio, turn your finances around, please do look me up. And just to let you know, I'm working on a small, we'll say a novice level property starter course, and that is going to be for the beginners out there. It's going to be priced accordingly, very accessible. It's not going to be for guys that are looking to scale their portfolio. It's going to be for guys that are looking to buy their first property perhaps. So stay tuned, keep an eye out for that, and I'll be coming with that fairly soon as well. So guys, have a good one, and we'll speak to you next week. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Facade. If you enjoyed the show or found it in any way useful, could I please ask you to take a moment to leave a review over on iTunes or Spotify. This really helps us get the podcast out in front of more people. If you have any questions or topics you would like me to cover in future episodes, please connect with me via my brand new school community. You will find a link in the show notes. You can stay up to date with all of my content and the projects I'm working on by signing up for my weekly newsletter over on my website, gavinjgallagher.com. That's all for now. See you back here, same time next week.